Welcome to Horrified Stories, where fear comes to life. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Let's start our today's story. The Last Room You'll Ever Enter, a haunted motel story. Sam Jenkins wasn't one to take detours. His life had been shaped by highways and interstates, by predictable routes that promised efficiency and safety. But this trip was different. After hours of driving through an unrelenting rainstorm, his usual confidence behind the wheel began to wane. The GPS screen flickered intermittently, and the signal bar disappeared entirely, leaving him with only vague instructions from his last check. He glanced at the fuel gauge, nearly empty. He hadn't noticed how far he'd driven without stopping. A momentary flash of panic surged, but as he rounded a bend on the dark, two-lane road, a neon glow cut through the rain. Vacancy. It blinked, the red light pulsing faintly in the storm. Beneath it, a weathered sign read, Ashwood Motel, affordable comfort. Sam's first instinct was to keep driving. The place looked like something out of an old horror movie, complete with peeling paint on the building and a rusty car that hadn't moved in years parked in the lot. But the rain came down harder, and his car sputtered ominously. He didn't have much of a choice. Pulling into the lot, he noted the eerie stillness. The only sounds were the rhythmic slap of rain against the roof and the distant hum of the neon sign. The lobby door creaked open before he even reached it, and an elderly man with sunken eyes and a hollow smile appeared. "Looking for a room?" a man asked, his voice dry as sandpaper. Sam hesitated, his instinct screaming at him to turn back, but practicality won out. "Yeah, just for the night." The man slid a key across the desk without checking any records. "Room 6, down at the end, cash only?" Sam handed over a few bills, his fingers brushing the man's cold, clammy skin. As he walked back to his car, he glanced over his shoulder. The man was still standing at the window, watching him. Room 6 was as unremarkable as Sam expected. Mustier, a single flickering bulb in the corner, and furniture that looked older than him. The bedspread had a faded floral pattern, and the walls were covered in dated wallpaper curling at the edges. Still, it was dry, and it was warm. He locked the door, double-checked the deadbolt, and dropped his bag onto the bed. The storm outside raged, the rain pounding against the windows like impatient fingers. Sam tried to unwind, scrolling through his phone, but the screen stayed stubbornly blank. No signal, no Wi-Fi. The unease that had been building since he entered the motel grew stronger. He told himself it was just the storm, the isolation. Yet there was something. Oh! A knock at the door startled him. It was faint, almost timid, but unmistakable. Sam's heart raced. He hadn't seen anyone else check in, and the old man didn't seem the type to make room calls. He approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" Silence. He pressed his ear to the door, straining to hear over the rain. For a moment, nothing. Then, a whisper, "Don't stay here." Sam yanked the door open, but no one was there. The empty walkway stretched in both directions, lit only by the neon glow and the occasional flash of lightning. He stepped outside, the cold rain soaking through his shirt in seconds. He called out, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. He retreated to the room, locking the door again and securing the chain latch for good measure. As he turned, he frowned. See, the bed was made. He hadn't made it. The unease turned to dread. Sam backed toward the door, his eyes darting around the room. It was identical to how he left it except for the bed. His back, which had been on the mattress, was now neatly placed on the chair in the corner. His breathing quickened. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, that he was tired and overreacting. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. Deciding he needed to clear his head, Sam stepped into the bathroom. The air was damp and heavy, and the smell of mildew clung to every surface. He splashed cold water on his face and avoided looking in the mirror for as long as possible. When he finally did, his heart skipped a beat. There was something in the reflection, something that wasn't behind him, a faint outline of a figure, just at the edge of the glass. It was blurry, almost like a smudge, but unmistakable. Sam spun around, his back pressing against the sink. The bathroom was empty. He turned back to the mirror. The figure was closer now. Panic surged through him, and he stumbled out of the bathroom, slamming the door shut. He grabbed his bag and headed for the door, determined to leave, but the chain latch wouldn't budge. His hands trembled as he tried to undo it, the metal sticking as the rusted shut. Behind him, the bathroom door creaked open. Sam didn't look back. Sam's heart pounded as he stood frowning by the door. He could feel the air shift, colder, heavier, and with it, an unmistakable presence. The creak of the bathroom door hung in the air like a taunt. He kept his eyes forward. Whatever was behind him He wasn't about to look. His fingers worked frantically at the chain latch, sweat slicking his palms as he struggled against the rusted metal. Click! The latch finally gave way. Sam yanked the door open and stumbled into the rain. He barely made it 3 steps before he stopped dead in his tracks. The neon vacancy sign wasn't flashing anymore. Instead, it was completely off, leaving the parking lot bathed in shadows. The only light came from room 6's open doorway, a dim yellow glow spilling onto the wet pavement. He turned back to look at the office, hoping to see the old man, but the lobby was dark, the windows boarded up as if it hadn't been used in years. "This isn't possible," Sam muttered, his breath visible in the suddenly icy air. Behind him, the door to room 6 slammed shut. Sam jumped, his pulse racing. He backed away, gripping his bag tightly as he scanned the parking lot for any sign of life. The rusty car he'd seen earlier was still there, its windows fogged, but there was no one inside. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice echoing unnaturally. "Is anyone here?" Silence answered him. Even the rain seemed muted now, its sound distant and wrong. A low whisper carried through the air, barely audible but unmistakable. "Sam!" His blood ran cold. The voice wasn't familiar, but it knew his name. He spun around, searching for the source, but the lot was empty. His car Saturday where he left it, but it suddenly looked foreign, alien, like it didn't belong to him anymore. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Sam, don't leave." He dropped his bag and ran for the car. Fumbling with his keys, he managed to unlock the door and throw himself inside. The familiar smell of the interior gave him a brief, fleeting sense of relief. But when he turned the key, the engine didn't start. Click, click, click. "Come on, come on," he shouted, slamming the steering wheel. The whisper returned, now right outside the car. "Stay with us." Sam's breath hitched. He turned toward the passenger window, his movements slow and hesitant, as if his body was acting against his better judgment. There, pressed against the glass, was a face. It wasn't human, not entirely. Its features were distorted, stretched, and blurred like a reflection in rippling water. The eyes were hollow, empty voids that seemed to pull at him, drawing him into their darkness. Sam screamed and scrambled out of the car, slipping on the wet pavement as he ran blindly toward the road. The rain lashed against his face, but he didn't care. He just needed to get away. But as he reached the edge of the lot, he stopped. The road was gone. In its place was an endless expanse of black, an abyss that seemed to stretch forever. The rain disappeared as soon as it crossed the edge, vanishing into the void like it had never existed. Sam turned back to the motel, his chest heaving. The vacancy sign was lit again, its red glow pulsing like a heartbeat. The door to room 6 stood wide open, beckoning him. And then he saw them. Figures stood in the windows of the other rooms, their silhouettes faint but unmistakable. They didn't move, didn't react to the storm. They just stood there, watching him. "Please," Sam whispered, his voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The whispering grew louder, a cacophony of voices overlapping and intertwining. "Stay. Don't leave. It's safe here." Safe. Nothing about this place was safe. Sam backed away, his mind racing. He needed a plan, a way out. His phone could try calling for help. He dug into his pocket, his fingers trembling as he pulled it out. No signal, of course. But then the screen flickered to life, displaying a single message. He stared at it, his heart hammering in his chest. The message blinked, over and over, as if mocking him. He looked back at the room. The light inside flickered, shadows dancing across the walls, and then he saw a figure standing just inside the doorway. It was the old man from the lobby, but his appearance had changed. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were gone, replaced by empty sockets that unseed black. His mouth moved, but the words were drowned out by the whispering, which grew louder and louder until it was all Sam could hear. Covering his ears, he fell to his knees, desperate to block out the sound, but it was inside him now, crawling through his mind like worms. "Room 6, the voices said in unison, their tone final, absolute. Sam felt his body move against his will, his legs carrying him toward the room. He fought it, digging his heels into the ground, but it was no use. The pull was too strong. As he crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him. The room was different now. The walls were covered in writing, hundreds or so, thousands of names scrawled in dark, dried streaks that could only be blood. The bed was gone, replaced by a large, ornate mirror that took up the entire back wall. Sam's reflection stared back at him, but it wasn't quite right. The movements were delayed, jerky, like watching a bad recording. And then his reflection smiled. Sam didn't. Welcome home? It's Ed. Its voice layered with down-scenes of others. He stumbled backward, his legs hitting something solid. Turning, he saw the bed again, but now it was occupied. A woman lay there, her body twisted and broken, her eyes wide with terror. Her lips moved, forming words Sam couldn't hear. The mirror flickered, and the whispers returned, louder and more frantic. The walls seemed to pulse, the names shifting and rearranging themselves. Sam's name appeared. He screamed. The last thing he saw before everything went dark was his reflection, reaching through the glass. When Sam woke, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The storm was gone, replaced by an oppressive stillness that pressed against his ears like cotton. His body ached as if he'd been thrown into a cement mixer, and when he tried to move, the muscles in his arms and legs protested. He blinked against the dim light, trying to orient himself. He was no longer in room 6, or at least, not the room 6 he'd entered. The walls, once covered in peeling wallpaper, were now bare concrete, their surface damp and cold. The floor was the same, slick beneath his palms as he tried to push himself upright. The air smelled of mildew and decay, thick enough to make him gag. The mirror was still there, but it had changed. The ornate frame was cracked and rusted, and the glass shimmered unnaturally, like it was alive. Sam's reflection was still visible, but it didn't move when he did. Instead, it stared at him, its expression twisted into a mocking grin. "Welcome to the other side. It's Ed," its voice reverberating like a shout in a cavern. Sam stumbled backward, his pulse hammering in his ears. What is this? Where am I? The reflection tilted its head, its grin widening. "You're exactly where you're meant to be. Don't you feel it? The pull. Oh wait, this place has been waiting for you." "Sam, no," Sam whispered, shaking his head. "This isn't real. It's just a nightmare." The reflection laughed, the sound cold and hollow. "Oh, it's real. More real than anything you've ever known. And you're part of it now." Sam's breath came in short, panicked bursts. He turned away from the mirror, scanning the room for an exit, but there was none. The door was gone, replaced by a seamless expanse of concrete. The only light came from the mirror, its surface pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The whispers returned, faint at first but growing louder with each passing second. "Sam, stay. You can't leave." He clamped his hands over his ears, trying to drown them out, but they only grew louder, more insistent. "Stop," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Just stop." The whispers fell silent. For a moment, the room was still, and, from the corner of his eye, Sam saw movement. He turned to find the woman from the bed, standing in the far corner of the room. Her body was still broken, her limbs bent at unnatural angles, but she moved toward him with slow, jerking steps. "Help me," she whispered, her voice raspy and filled with pain. Sam backed away, his heart racing. "You don't know how. I don't even know what's happening." Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, locked onto his. "You're part of it now. We all are." She stepped closer, her movements growing smoother, more deliberate. "You can't leave. Not until it's finished." "Finished," Sam repeated, his voice shaking. "What's finished?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm. The touch was ice cold, sending a jolt through his body. Images flashed through his mind, rooms filled with shadows, faces twisted in agony, names scratched into walls, and the endless, pulsing glow of the vacancy sign. He yanked his arm away, stumbling back into the mirror. The glass felt warm against his skin, almost alive, and his reflection shifted, its expression growing darker. "You can't run. It's Ed," his voice low and menacing. "This place is inside you now. There's no escape." Sam's panic turned to anger. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of this." The reflection laughed again, a sound that sent chills down his spine. "It doesn't matter what you want. The motel chooses, and it chose you." Before Sam could respond, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and the room around him began to change. The walls stretched and twisted, the concrete morphing into something organic, like flesh. The whispers returned, louder than ever, and the woman dissolved into shadows, her form blending into the pulsating walls. Sam dropped to his knees, clutching his head as the world spun around him. "Stop," it pleaded, his voice barely audible. "Please, just stop." The whispers converged into a single voice, deep and commanding. "You belong to us now." When the room finally stopped shifting, Sam found himself in a narrow hallway. The walls were covered in more names, their blood-red letters glowing faintly in the dim light. The air was thick and humid, making it hard to breathe. At the end of the hallway, a door waited. It was identical to the one for room 6, its surface cracked and worn, A faint light seeped through the gap beneath it, flickering like a dying bulb. Sam didn't want to move, but something compelled him forward. Each step felt heavy, like he was wading through water, but he couldn't stop. The whispers followed him, their tones shifting between pleading and threatening. Don't open it. You have to open it. Run. Stay. When he reached the door, his hand moved on its own, gripping the tarnished doorknob. The metal was warm to the touch, almost burning his skin, but it didn't let go. As he turned the knob, the whisper stopped. The door swung open, revealing a room identical to the one he'd left behind room 6, with its musty air, flickering bulb, and floral-patterned bedspread. But something was wrong. The bed was occupied. Sam stepped inside, his movements slow and hesitant. The figure on the bed was him. He stared, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The other Sam lay motionless, his face pale and lifeless. And then the eyes opened. The figure smiled, its expression cold and malicious. You made it, it said, its voice echoing. Welcome home? Sam stumbled back, his heart racing. This isn't real. It can't be real. The figure Saturday up, its movements unnaturally fluid. Oh, it's real. More real than you'll ever understand. Before Sam could react, the door slammed shut behind him, and the room began to shift again. The walls closed in, the ceiling descended, and the light flickered faster and faster until everything was swallowed by darkness. In the void, the whispers returned, their voices overlapping and suffocating. Stay with us, Sam, forever. The darkness pressed against Sam from all sides, thick and suffocating, as though it were alive. He couldn't see, couldn't move, couldn't even tell if he was breathing anymore. The whispers swirled around him, their voices a maddening chorus of overlapping tones. Forever. Stay with us. You belong here. No, Sam screamed, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive void. He felt a sudden pull, like he was being yanked forward by unseen hands. His body dragged through the darkness. His limbs flailed uselessly, and his mind teetered on the edge of breaking. Then, without warning, the darkness fell away. He landed hard on a cold, tile floor, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. Gasping, he pushed himself up and looked around. He was in the motel lobby or something that resembled it. The walls were stained with streaks of black, the front desk was splintered and warped, and the vacancy sign hanging in the window pulsed with a sickly red glow. Behind the desk stood the old man, but his form was even more grotesque now. His skin was translucent, his veins black and writhing beneath the surface, and his empty eye sockets seed a dark, viscous liquid. You're settling in nicely, the old man rasped, his voice layered with multiple tones. Sam staggered to his feet, his back pressing against the wall. What do you want from me? Why are you doing this? The old man tilted his head, his smile stretching impossibly wide. It's not about what we want, Sam. It's about what you brought with you. What I brought, Sam stammered. The old man nodded slowly. Everyone who comes here brings something, the piece of themselves they've tried to bury, to forget. Pain, regret, guilt. The motel, it feeds on that. It thrives on it. And you, my boy. He leaned closer, his face inches from Sam's. You've brought us a feast. Sam's stomach churned. He shook his head, his voice trembling. I don't understand. You will, the old man said, his tone almost gleeful. He gestured toward the hallway leading to the rooms. The walls shifted, warping and twisting like flesh, and a door materialized at the end of the hall. It was room 6. No, Sam whispered, shaking his head. I'm not going back in there. You don't have a choice, the old man said, his voice sharp and final. The motel has claimed you. There's no escaping it now. The only way out is through. Before Sam could react, the floor beneath him shifted, tilting sharply and sending him sliding down the hallway. He clawed at the walls, but they were slick and pulsing, offering no grip. The door to room 6 loomed ahead, wide open, its dark interior like a gaping maw. He tried to scream, but the sound was ripped from his throat as he was swallowed by the room. Sand hit the floor hard, the air rushing from his lungs. When he opened his eyes, he was back in room 6. The bed, the flickering light, the musty smell, it was all the same. But now, the walls were alive, their surface shifting and writhing like they were breathing. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling. The mirror was back, its surface shimmering unnaturally, and in its reflection, Sam saw something that made his blood run cold. The woman was there, standing just behind him, but now, her broken form was whole, her limbs straightened, her face calm. She looked almost human. Who are you? Sam demanded, spinning to face her. I was like you once, she said, her voice soft but heavy with sorrow. I came to the motel, I thought it was just a place to stay for the night. What happened? Her eyes filled with a deep sadness. The motel shows you your truth, the things you've tried to hide from yourself. And if you can't face them, she gestured to the walls, where the names shifted and pulsed like veins. You become part of it. Sam's gaze darted to the walls. The names glowed faintly, each one a life claimed by the motel. His name was there, pulsating brighter than the others. No, he said, his voice trembling. I'm not like them. I can't leave. I will leave. You can try, the woman said, her tone almost pitying. But first, you'll have to face it. Face what? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped aside, revealing the mirror. Its surface rippled, and an image began to form. It was a car, flipped over on the side of a road, its frame mangled and smoking. Sam's stomach dropped as he recognized it. No, he whispered, backing away. The image shifted, showing the inside of the car. A woman Saturday in the passenger seat, her head slumped forward, blood dripping from a gash on her temple. No, Sam shouted, his voice cracking. The reflection changed again, this time showing Sam himself, sitting behind the wheel. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he stared at the woman. Do you remember now? The woman in the room asked, her voice echoing in his ears. Sam shook his head violently. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't. You were driving, she said, her tone firm. You were arguing, you weren't paying attention, and when the car swerved, tears streamed down Sam's face as the memories came rushing back. The fight, the screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal, and then the silence. She didn't survive, the woman said, stepping closer, and you've been running from it ever since. Sam fell to his knees, his body racked with sobs. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. The motel knows, she said. It brought you here to face it, to decide if you can live with it or if you let it consume you. Sam looked up at her, his eyes filled with desperation. How do I make it stop? How do I get out of here? She knelt beside him, her expression somber. You have to let go. Forgive yourself. If you don't, she glanced at the walls, where the names pulsed ominously. You'll stay here, forever. The mirror shimmered again, and Sam's reflection stared back at him. This time, it looked like him, tired, broken, but undeniably him. It's your choice, the reflection said, its voice calm. Stay here, trapped in your guilt, or let it go and move on. Sam closed his eyes, the weight of the decision crushing him. He thought of the life they could have had if things had been different, but he also knew the truth. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. As the words left his lips, the room began to change. The walls stilled, the whispers faded, and the oppressive weight lifted. When he opened his eyes, he was back in his car. The rain had stopped, and the road stretched out before him, empty and quiet. The Ashwood Motel was gone. Sam gripped the steering wheel, his hand steady for the first time in what felt like forever. He took a deep breath, the air cool and clean, and started the car. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, he thought he saw the vacancy sign flicker in the distance. But when he blinked, it was gone. And so was the weight. If you liked this story, don't forget to hit the like button, share and subscribe the channel. Help us grow. Thanks for watching.